Hello, I hope you're doing great. So, in today's lesson, we are going to focus on the international legal and the human rights framework for the prohibition of FGM. My name is Winnie Barawa, and if you're returning, just to know this is a series we are conducting on the sensitization and the interventions we are taking towards ending FGM in our communities. And this is a partnership project that we are working together with the University of Nairobi, the Girl Generation and ACAF, which means Africa Coordinating Center for Abandonment of FGM. My name is Winnie Barawa. So in our prior sessions, we have discussed about the code of conduct and ethics that guide our doctors, nurses, and midwives when it comes to care, management, and prevention of FGM. But in this particular case, we want to focus more on how the international legal framework works so that it promotes the prohibition of FGM in the different countries. So work with me as we start. And please don't forget to subscribe. Click on the thumbs up so that you get notified when we post the next class. So let's start first and foremost. What is the introduction bit? What is the background about FGM? So FGM is a criminal offense and it is prohibited under the law. Why? Because it is a violation of the rights of women and girls. And these rights include rights to equality and non-discrimination. It also violates the right to good health. It violates the right to be free from violence, cruel and degrading treatment. And this degrading treatment includes the FGM in that regard. So just understand why FGM is not encouraged is the fact that this is a violation of human rights, including for the girls and the women rights. When looking at it, you see the aspect of the right to equality, non-discrimination, the right to good health, the right to be free from violence, cruel and degrading treatment. So these are some of the rights that you can relate when you're looking at how FGM violates these rights. Next, it shows that it is a barrier to girls and women in enjoying their fundamental right, and part of this is the right to education. So you can see when it comes to the social effect, FGM literally even affects the social right of the girls and women to enjoy services such as education. Why? It's because when a woman undergoes FGM, it interferes with her normal social activities, and part of this is attending to education or even attending to family. So these are some of the rights that are basically influenced or affected by FGM. So looking at this, we now see why the International Human Rights Framework is very important in helping us prevent the propagation of the behavior of FGM. So let's look at part of the international human rights framework that prohibit FGM. So referencing to Kenya, Kenya is a party to some or several of the international human rights laws and instruments which help in expressing and implicit provisions that prohibit FGM. So therefore, Kenya has an obligation under these laws to place in measures that ensure there is abandonment of FGM in the country. And to just check on part of this laws and part of the obligations that Kenya has to do, let's just explore some of the international human rights that are in place. So Kenya has obligations to promote abandonment of FGM, and we have these particular international human rights laws that help us to do that. So these are instruments. Some are published conventions and covenants that countries have committed to adhere to and to give commitments on how they will eliminate FGM in the countries. And you see that part here we have the Universal Declarations on Human Rights, which is known as the UDHR. And then we have the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, that is ICCPR, sorry. Then we have the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. And then another one in place is the Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. Then we have the Convention on the Rights of the Child. And then we have Declaration on the Elimination of All Forms of Violence Against Women. And lastly, we've got the recent one, which is the International Conference on Population and Development. So in these frameworks, it highlights how women and girls' rights are and how do we protect them. And it asks for each country to provide their well-outlined commitments on how they plan to eliminate this. So Kenya has been able to make commitment towards this international framework, And part of this is to ensure that FGM has been abandoned in our communities. Now, coming down from the international level, we get to move to the regional level. And in this regional level, in this regards, we are referring to Africa. So at the regional level, we have the regional human rights law framework for the prohibition of FGM. So the frameworks at the regional level looks at the African region, and it has these laws that help in protecting the rights of women and girls in Africa. So they take into account like specific issues that affect African women and girls, and they provide different provisions on how to handle them. So to check through a few of them, it says the African Regional Human Rights Framework provides further protection for the rights of women and girls in Africa. They take into account the specific issues that affect women or affect African women and girls. So for us to get more details on where do I understand these frameworks from, we have several documents and instruments on that. And one of it is the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, which explains the rights of women and girls. And then we have the rights of women in Africa based on the Maputo Declaration or the Maputo Protocol. So Article 5 of this specifically lists FGM as a harmful cultural practice and it prohibits it. Then we come to the African Charter. We have the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child. So what this charter does, it provides for the protection of girls, for the protection of the rights of children, and specifically under their Article 16, it prohibits all forms of child abuse and torture, which includes in this regards degrading and inhuman treatments and physical and mental injury or abuse. So you can see while we were discussing FGM, when you revert back to complications of FGM, you can see there's physical injury, there's pain, there's all this damage and so on. So being a physically damaging procedure in the first place with no known medical reasons, therefore FGM falls it under this, that it's basically violating the rights of the children in the aspects of degrading practices that lead to physical injury and mental injury. So you can see how the frameworks are. We have the African frameworks, and then we have the international human rights frameworks, and then we have the regional human rights framework focusing on the African region. And under this, you can see the African Charter on Human Rights. You can see the rights of women in Africa based on the Maputo Declaration and Protocol. And then we have the African Charter on the rights and the welfare of children. Why are children being included here, you may ask? The main reason for that is because the FGM practice is not pegged on a particular age group. So it can happen even on a newly born baby, that is a newborn, and it can be even practiced even in adult women at different transition stages. So children have to be included in this declaration because they are also at risk of the practice of this FGM. So it's critical that that is included here. So thank you for staying around. I really love it when you go with me all the way to the end. So please give us a like, a comment, share, and also subscribe to our work. Thank you and see you in our next lessons. Bye bye.